What if I told you that in the summer of 1886, the United States Army fought a battle so terrifying, so inexplicable, that every official record of it was burned within a week? What if I told you that 400 soldiers entered a canyon in the Arizona Territory and only 17 walked out alive? And what if I told you that the Apache warriors, who were supposed to be the enemy, were the only ones who knew what was really waiting in that darkness, because they had been preparing for that battle for over 300 years? Before we go any further, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now telling me where you are watching this from. What state, what country, what corner of the world, and if you have ever felt that something ancient is watching from the shadows, something that history has tried to bury, then hit that subscribe button. This channel exists to dig up the truths that powerful men have spent centuries trying to hide. Help us keep the light shining into the darkness. Now let me take you back to a land of red rock and endless sky. Back to a time when the American frontier was still wild, still dangerous, still full of secrets that no white man had ever learned. Back to the place the Apache called Chidinbia, the Canyon of Shadows, and the soldiers called simply Hell's Mouth. The official history says the Apache Wars ended in September of 1886, when Geronimo surrendered to General Nelson Miles at Skeleton Canyon. The official history says the last hostile Apache were rounded up and shipped to Florida, where they lived out their days as prisoners of war. The official history says the American Southwest was finally pacified, finally safe, finally open for settlement and civilization. The official history is a lie. What really happened in the summer of 1886 was so horrifying that the War Department created an entirely new classification level just to bury it. Documents were sealed. Witnesses were silenced. Soldiers who survived were scattered to remote posts across the country and forbidden from ever speaking about what they had seen. And the canyon where it happened was declared a restricted military zone, off limits to civilians, and has remained so for nearly 140 years. The story begins with a man named Captain William Stanton. He was 43 years old, a veteran of the Civil War and 15 years of Indian campaigns. He had fought the Comanche in Texas. He had chased the Nez Perce across Montana. He had killed more men than he could count and watched more friends die than he cared to remember. He was, by all accounts, one of the most experienced and capable officers in the United States Army. On July 14th, 1886, Captain Stanton received orders that would end his life and the lives of most of the men under his command. The orders came directly from General George Crook, the famous Grey Wolf who had spent years hunting Geronimo across the Sierra Madre. Crook had received intelligence suggesting that a band of Apache warriors had taken refuge in a remote canyon, approximately 60 miles northeast of Fort Bowie. The band was reportedly led by a medicine man named Goyathle, which the Americans translated as one who yawns, though the Apache themselves used a different name for him. They called him Dakea, the one who sees. Crook's intelligence suggested that Dakea had gathered perhaps 50 warriors in the canyon, along with women and children. It was supposed to be a simple operation. Surround the canyon, cut off the water supply, wait for the Apache to surrender or starve. Captain Stanton would lead a force of 400 soldiers, including 2 companies of cavalry and 3 companies of infantry, supported by Apache scouts from the White Mountain Band who had agreed to work with the army. What Crook did not know, what his intelligence had failed to reveal, was that Dakea had not chosen that canyon as a hiding place. He had chosen it as a killing ground, and the warriors gathered. There were not refugees fleeing the army. They were guardians who had been waiting for this moment for 3 centuries. The expedition set out from Fort Bowie on July 16th. The heat was murderous. Temperatures exceeded 110 degrees by midday. Men collapsed from sunstroke. Horses died in their traces. The column stretched for almost a mile across the desert, raising a cloud of dust that could be seen for 20 miles in any direction. Sergeant Major Thomas Brennan, a grizzled Irishman who had been with Stanton for almost a decade, kept a detailed journal of the expedition. That journal would later become the only surviving first-hand account of what happened in the canyon. It was discovered in 1947 in the attic of Brennan's grandson's home in Boston, and it has never been officially acknowledged by the United States military. July 16th, Brennan wrote, "Departed Fort Bowie at 0400 hours. Heat already oppressive. The men are in good spirits despite the conditions. Captain Stanton believes we will reach the target canyon within 3 days. The Apache scouts seem uneasy. They speak among themselves in their language and fall silent whenever officers approach. I do not like the look in their eyes." The unease among the Apache scouts would prove prophetic. These were men who had agreed to work with the army, men who had their own reasons for opposing Geronimo and the hostile bands, but they knew something about the canyon that the soldiers did not. They knew the stories their grandmothers had told them. They knew the warnings that had been passed down for generations. On the evening of July 17th, as the column made camp near a dry wash called Coyote Creek, the senior Apache scout approached Captain Stanton's tent. His name was Apache, and he had been awarded the Medal of Honor for his service in the Tonto Basin campaign a decade earlier. He was one of the most decorated Native American soldiers in American history, and he was terrified. The conversation between Apache and Stanton was later reconstructed from multiple sources, including Brennan's journal and the testimony of a lieutenant named Edward Carrington, who was present at the meeting. "Captain," Apache said, "we cannot go to that canyon. My men will not enter it. No Apache will." Stanton was not accustomed to being told what his scouts would and would not do. He reminded Apache that they were under Army command. He reminded him of the terms of their service. He reminded him, perhaps unwisely, of what happened to scouts who disobeyed orders. Apache did not flinch. He looked at Stanton with eyes that had seen things no white man could imagine, and he spoke words that would haunt the captain for the rest of his very short life. "You do not understand," Apache said. "That canyon is not a place for soldiers. It is not a place for war. It is a place where the old ones sleep. Dakea has gone there to wake them, and if you follow him, if you enter that darkness, you will wake them too, and they will be hungry." Stanton dismissed the warning as superstition. He had heard similar stories throughout his career. Every tribe had its sacred places, its forbidden grounds, its tales of spirits and monsters. He had never given them any credit. He was a man of science, a man of the modern age. He did not believe in old ones or ancient sleepers or anything that could not be killed with rifle and bayonet. That night, every Apache scout deserted. They slipped away in the darkness, taking their horses and their weapons and their knowledge of the terrain. By morning, Stanton's force had lost its eyes and ears. The men who knew this land better than anyone alive. Brennan's journal records the captain's reaction. He was furious. He ordered a detachment to pursue the deserters. He threatened courts-martial and firing squads, but in the end, he decided to press on. He had his orders, he had his maps, he had 400 well-armed soldiers. He did not need Apache scouts to find a canyon and root out 50 warriors. The column reached the entrance to the canyon on the afternoon of July 19th. What they found there should have made them turn back. It should have made any rational man turn back. But Stanton was not thinking rationally anymore. He was thinking about glory. He was thinking about the promotion that would surely follow the capture of Dakea. He was thinking about proving that the superstitious cowards who had deserted him were wrong. The canyon entrance was marked by 2 massive pillars of red stone, each one rising over 200 feet into the shimmering sky. Between them, the walls of the canyon dropped away into shadow. Even at midday, with the sun directly overhead, the interior of the canyon was dark, not shaded, not dim, dark, as if the light itself refused to enter. Lieutenant Carrington later described the scene in a letter to his wife, a letter that was intercepted by Army censors and never delivered. The air changed as we approached, Carrington wrote. It grew cold, not cool, not refreshing after the terrible heat of the desert. Cold, the kind of cold you feel in a root cellar or a crypt. The horses became agitated. Several refused to move forward. One threw its rider and galloped back the way we had come, and there was a smell. I cannot describe it adequately. It was like nothing I have ever encountered. Sweet and rotten at once, like flowers left too long on a grave. Sergeant Brennan noted similar observations. The canyon mouth exhales like a living thing, he wrote. The men are frightened. I am frightened, but the captain will not be deterred. He says we will enter at dawn and have the hostiles in chains by sunset. God help us all. That night, the soldiers made camp approximately half a mile from the canyon entrance. They posted double guards. They kept the fires burning high, and they tried not to listen to the sounds that drifted out of the darkness. Private Marcus Wheeler, a young recruit from Ohio who had joined the army to escape the poverty of his family's farm, described the sounds in a letter that was later found among his personal effects. It started around midnight, Wheeler wrote, a kind of humming, low and deep, like a church organ playing a single note that never ends. Then there were voices, not words, not any language I recognized, but voices, many voices, all speaking at once, rising and falling like waves on a shore. Some of the men thought it was the Apache trying to frighten us with some kind of ritual. But I do not think it was the Apache. I do not think it was human at all. Captain Stanton refused to acknowledge the sounds. He refused to acknowledge the fear spreading through his men like a contagion. He paced the perimeter of the camp, checking the guards, inspecting the horses, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. But Brennan saw him slip behind his tent at one point and vomit into the sagebrush. The captain was afraid too. He just would not admit it. At 4:30 in the morning on July 20th, 1886, Captain William Stanton led 400 soldiers into the Canyon of Shadows. They marched in standard formation, cavalry in front, infantry following, supply wagons bringing up the rear. The column was over a quarter-mile long. The men were armed with Springfield rifles, Colt revolvers, and bayonets. They were the best-trained, best-equipped fighting force in the American West. None of that would matter. The first thing the soldiers noticed was the silence. The sounds from the previous night had stopped completely. There were no birds, no insects, no wind. The walls of the canyon rose on either side, red and orange and brown, streaked with black veins that looked almost like writing in some unknown language. The floor of the canyon was covered with fine red sand that muffled the footsteps of men and horses alike. They marched for almost an hour without incident. The canyon twisted and turned, narrowing in some places to barely 50 feet across, widening in others to almost a quarter-mile. The walls grew higher as they advanced, until the strip of sky visible above them was just a thin ribbon of blue. And then they found the first marker. It was a pile of stones, perhaps 4 feet high, arranged in a rough pyramid. On top of the pyramid was a skull. Not a human skull. Something else. Something with an elongated cranium and massive eye sockets and teeth that were too long, too sharp, too numerous. Brennan described it as like a man's skull that had been stretched and twisted by some terrible disease. Carrington said it reminded him of illustrations he had seen in old books about demons and monsters. Captain Stanton ordered the column to halt. He dismounted and approached the marker alone. He stood before it for several minutes, studying the skull, studying the stones, studying the symbols that had been carved into the canyon wall behind it. Then he turned back to his men and gave an order that Brennan would remember for the rest of his life. "This is Apache witchcraft," Stanton said, "meant to frighten superstitious fools. We will not be frightened. Sergeant Major, have the men knock down this pile of rocks and destroy that skull. We will not be intimidated by savage tricks." Brennan hesitated. Something in his gut, something deeper than training or discipline, screamed at him not to touch the marker. But he was a soldier. He followed orders. He selected 2 privates and walked toward the pile of stones. The moment he touched the first stone, the humming began again. It came from everywhere at once. From the walls of the canyon, from the ground beneath their feet, from the air itself. It was louder than before, much louder, a vibration that seemed to penetrate directly into the bones of every man present. Horses reared and screamed. Soldiers dropped their rifles and clapped their hands over their ears. Some fell to their knees, some began to pray, and then the shadows began to move. Brennan would later struggle to describe what he saw. The darkness in the canyon seemed to thicken, to congeal, to take on shapes that were almost human, but not quite. They rose from the ground like smoke. They peeled away from the walls like strips of black cloth. They had no features, no faces, no eyes, but they moved with purpose. They moved toward the soldiers. Captain Stanton drew his revolver and fired into the nearest shadow. The bullet passed through it without effect. He fired again. Nothing. The shadow reached him, enveloped him, and Stanton began to scream. It was a sound that Brennan would hear in his nightmares for the next 40 years. Not a scream of pain exactly, a scream of absolute terror. A scream of a man who was seeing something so horrible that his mind was shattering under the weight of it. The captain fell to his knees. His revolver dropped from his hand. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, and tears of blood were streaming down his face. He screamed for almost 30 seconds. Then he went silent. Then he fell forward into the red sand and did not move again. Chaos erupted. Soldiers fired in every direction, their bullets tearing through shadows that reformed as quickly as they were dispersed. The cavalry tried to retreat, but their horses would not obey. The animals were panicking, running in circles, throwing their riders, trampling men who fell beneath their hooves. The infantry tried to form a defensive square, but the shadows were everywhere, passing through their ranks like a cold wind, touching man after man after man. Everyone the shadows touched fell screaming. Everyone the shadows touched lay still. Brennan ran. He was not proud of it. He would carry the shame for the rest of his life. But in that moment, with the darkness closing in from every direction and his comrades dying around him, survival instinct overwhelmed everything else. He grabbed a horse that had lost its rider, mounted it, and rode for the canyon entrance as fast as the animal would carry him. He was not alone. Others were running too. He saw soldiers fleeing on foot, throwing away their weapons, their discipline completely shattered. He saw men climbing the canyon walls, trying to escape over the rim. He saw a young lieutenant standing perfectly still in the middle of the chaos, his mouth moving in what might have been prayer, his eyes fixed on something Brennan could not see. The shadows did not pursue those who fled. They seemed focused on the center of the column, on the men who had not yet broken, on the soldiers who were still trying to fight. Brennan would later wonder why. He would wonder if the shadows were feeding on something, fear perhaps, or courage, or simply the presence of living men in a place where the living were not meant to be. It took Brennan almost 20 minutes to reach the canyon entrance. When he finally emerged into the sunlight, he collapsed from his horse and lay in the sand, gasping for breath. His heart pounding so hard he thought it would burst. He looked back at the canyon. The darkness within seemed deeper than before, and he could still hear the screaming. Over the next 2 hours, 16 other survivors staggered out of the canyon. Some were physically uninjured, but had gone completely mad, babbling about things in the dark. Old ones waking, the hungry shadows. Some were covered in blood that was not their own. One man, a corporal named James Hennessy, walked calmly out of the canyon, sat down on a rock, and cut his own throat with his bayonet without saying a word. By sunset, the survivors numbered 17. 400 soldiers had entered the canyon that morning. 17 walked out, and the Apache were waiting for them. They appeared on the ridgeline above the canyon entrance as the sun was setting, silhouetted against the blood-red sky. There were perhaps 40 of them, mounted on horses, armed with rifles and bows. At their head was a figure that Brennan recognized from the intelligence reports, an old man with silver hair and eyes that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Dakea, the one who sees. The survivors were too exhausted, too traumatized to run. They simply sat there, waiting for the end. After what they had witnessed in the canyon, death at Apache hands seemed almost merciful. But Dakea did not attack. He rode down from the ridge alone, dismounted, and walked toward the huddled group of survivors. He stopped a few feet from Brennan, the senior remaining soldier, and spoke in clear, heavily accented English. "You should not have come here," Dakea said. "This place is not for you. It has never been for you." Brennan tried to speak, but his voice would not come. He tried to reach for his weapon, but his hands would not obey. All he could do was stare at the old medicine man and wait. Dakea looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the canyon, at the darkness that still seemed to pulse and breathe in the fading light. And when he spoke again, his voice was heavy, with something that might have been sorrow. "We did not do this," he said. "We did not kill your soldiers. We came to make sure the old ones went back to sleep. We have been doing this for 300 years, since the Spanish first came to this land and woke them with their greed and their violence. We are the guardians. We are the only ones who know how to keep them contained." He paused, studying Brennan's face. "Your captain destroyed the wardstone," he continued, "the marker that kept the boundary sealed. We knew he would. The spirits told me he would. That is why we were waiting. That is why we were prepared." Brennan finally found his voice. "What?" he croaked. "What are they? What did we see in there?" Dakea did not answer immediately. He looked up at the darkening sky, at the first stars appearing in the east, at the ancient land that had seen so much blood and so much death over so many centuries. "They have many names," he said finally. "My people call them the Chidden, the spirits of the dead who refuse to move on. The Spanish called them demonios, demons from hell. Your people will probably call them something else, something that makes you feel like you understand them." He shook his head slowly. "But you do not understand them. You cannot understand them. They are older than your civilization, older than ours. They were here before the first humans walked this land. They will be here long after the last human is gone. All we can do, all anyone can do, is keep them sleeping, keep the boundaries sealed, keep the darkness contained." He turned back to Brennan, and his eyes were filled with a terrible pity. "Go back to your fort," he said. "Tell your generals what happened here. Tell them to seal this canyon forever. Tell them to never send soldiers here again, and pray to whatever god you worship that the old ones go back to sleep before they grow strong enough to leave this place." Brennan wanted to ask more questions. He wanted to understand what he had witnessed, what had killed his comrades, what lurked in the darkness of that terrible canyon. But Dakea was already walking away, mounting his horse, rejoining his warriors on the ridge. The last thing the medicine man said, shouted back over his shoulder as he rode into the gathering night, would stay with Brennan until the day he died. "We were prepared because we never forgot," Dakea called out. "You forgot everything. Your people forgot the old ways, the old warnings, the old knowledge. You thought your rifles and your machines made you masters of the world. But there are things in this world that do not care about rifles and machines. There are things that have been waiting in the darkness since before your ancestors crawled out of caves. And when you forget, when you stop listening, when you think you are too modern and too civilized to believe in monsters, that is when the monsters wake up." He paused at the top of the ridge, his silhouette black against the fading sky. "Remember this night," he said. "Remember what you saw, and never forget again." Then he was gone. The Apache vanished into the darkness as silently as they had appeared, and Sergeant Major Thomas Brennan was left alone with 16 broken men and the weight of a truth that would never be officially acknowledged. The survivors reached Fort Bowie 4 days later. General Crook was waiting for them with reinforcements, ready to mount a rescue operation. When he saw the condition of the men, when he heard Brennan's report, his face went grey. Within a week, the official story had been created. The Stanton expedition had been ambushed by a large force of hostile Apache. The soldiers had fought bravely but been overwhelmed. The canyon was too dangerous to recover the bodies. A permanent military exclusion zone was established around the area, and armed patrols were assigned to ensure that no civilians ever entered. The 17 survivors were separated and sent to posts across the country. They were ordered never to discuss what had happened. Those who refused to remain silent, those who tried to tell the truth, met with accidents, falls from horses, hunting mishaps, sudden illnesses. Within 3 years, only Brennan himself remained alive. He kept his silence for 40 years. He married. He had children. He retired from the army and lived quietly in Massachusetts, but he never forgot. He never stopped having nightmares, and in 1926, when he was 83 years old and knew he was dying, he finally wrote down everything that had happened in the Canyon of Shadows. His journal was hidden in his attic and forgotten until his grandson found it in 1947. The grandson tried to bring it to public attention. He contacted newspapers, he contacted historians, he contacted the War Department. Every door was closed in his face. The Canyon of Shadows remains a restricted military zone to this day. Officially, it is listed as an unexploded ordnance testing range. Unofficially, according to documents leaked by a former Pentagon analyst in 2019, it is classified under a designation that does not appear in any public military codebook. The designation is Guardian Protocol, and according to those leaked documents, the protocol is still active. Someone is still watching the canyon. Someone is still making sure the darkness stays contained. Someone is still doing the work that the Apache have been doing for 300 years, because the old ones never left. They are still there, sleeping in the shadows, waiting for someone foolish enough to wake them again. And if the documents are correct, they have been getting restless lately, very restless indeed. The story of the Canyon of Shadows did not end with Sergeant Brennan's death in 1927. It did not end with the military exclusion zone. It did not end with the official cover-up that erased 400 soldiers from history. The story continued, hidden in classified files and whispered rumors, passed down through generations of Apache who never forgot their sacred duty. And in 1954, the story nearly repeated itself. The documents that surfaced in 2019 included references to an incident codenamed Operation Sundown. According to these documents, a team of 12 scientists from a classified research division arrived at the canyon in March of 1954. They were investigating reports of unusual electromagnetic phenomena in the area. They had equipment that could detect radiation, measure seismic activity, and record sounds beyond the range of human hearing. They were accompanied by a military escort of 36 soldiers. None of them knew the history of the canyon. None of them had been told about Captain Stanton's expedition. None of them had any idea what they were walking into. The documents include excerpts from audio recordings made during the first 3 days of the operation. The scientists were excited, even giddy, about the readings they were getting. They described electromagnetic fluctuations that defied conventional physics. They recorded sounds in the infrasonic range that seemed to form patterns, almost like a language. They detected temperature variations that could not be explained by any natural phenomenon. On the 4th day, the recordings stopped. A rescue team was dispatched from a nearby Air Force base 48 hours later. They found the camp abandoned. Equipment was scattered across the canyon floor. Tents had been torn apart, and there were marks in the sand. Brennan's journal had described similar marks, patterns that looked almost like writing, carved into the ground by something that left no footprints. Of the 48 people who had entered the canyon, only 3 were found alive. 2 scientists were discovered huddled in a narrow crevice almost a mile from the camp. They were catatonic, unresponsive to any stimuli. They never spoke again. They spent the rest of their lives in a psychiatric facility in Nevada, where they died within a month of each other in 1971. The third survivor was a soldier, a sergeant named Robert Yellowhorse. He was Chiricahua Apache. Yellowhorse was found sitting on a rock near the canyon entrance, completely unharmed, smoking a cigarette. When the rescue team approached him, he looked at them with eyes that seemed far too old for his 26 years and said something that would later be included in the classified report. "I told them not to go in," he said. "I told them my grandmother's stories. They laughed at me. They called me a superstitious Indian. Now they are not laughing anymore." Yellowhorse was immediately taken into custody. He was interrogated for 3 weeks by military intelligence officers who demanded to know how he had survived when everyone else had died or gone mad. He told them the truth. He told them about the Apache Guardians. He told them about the 300 years of vigil. He told them about the rituals and the wards and the ancient knowledge that had been passed down from generation to generation. They did not believe him at first. They suspected him of collaborating with the Soviets, of sabotaging the expedition, of being part of some elaborate communist plot. The Cold War was at its height. Paranoia was everywhere. A Native American soldier who had survived an unexplained disaster was automatically suspect. But then they found his grandmother. Her name was Lozen Yellowhorse, and she was 93 years old. She lived in a small house on the San Carlos Apache Reservation, the same reservation where her ancestors had been imprisoned after the Apache Wars. She had never been to school. She had never learned to read or write. But she knew things that made the military intelligence officers very uncomfortable. She knew exactly how many soldiers had died in the canyon in 1886. She knew the name of Captain William Stanton. She knew the location of the ward stone that he had ordered destroyed. She knew details that had never been written down, never been recorded, never been shared with anyone outside the Apache Guardian tradition. And she knew what was sleeping in the canyon. The interview with Lozen Yellowhorse was recorded on a reel-to-reel tape recorder. That tape was classified at the highest possible level and stored in a vault beneath the Pentagon. Copies were made for a handful of senior officials. Most of those copies were destroyed in the 1980s, but one survived. It was discovered in 2012 by a researcher named Dr. Amanda Chen, who was cataloging materials in a forgotten archive at the National Security Agency. She listened to the tape 3 times before she understood what she was hearing. Then she made a copy, hid it in her personal belongings, and smuggled it out of the facility. The tape begins with Lozen speaking in Apache, her voice thin and reedy with age. A translator, probably Robert Yellowhorse himself, provides English interpretation. "You want to know about the Chidden," Lozen says, "the shadow people, the old ones who sleep in the canyon. I will tell you, but you will not believe me. Your people never believe until it is too late." She pauses. There is a sound of movement, perhaps someone adjusting the recording equipment. "Long ago, before my people came to this land, before any humans came to this land, they were already here. The Chidden, they lived in the darkness beneath the earth. They fed on things that no longer exist, creatures from a time before time, animals and plants and beings that your science has never discovered because they left no bones, no fossils, nothing but shadows. When the first humans arrived, the Chidden were curious. They had never seen creatures like us before. They watched us from the darkness. They studied us, and then they realized something. They realized that we carried something inside us that they did not have. Something that tasted better than anything they had ever consumed." The translator's voice wavers slightly. "Fear," Lozen continues. "We carry fear. It is the price we pay for being aware, for knowing that we will die, for understanding that the world is full of dangers we cannot control." The Chidden had never experienced fear. They were immortal. They had no predators. They had nothing to be afraid of. But when they touched a human mind, when they reached inside and found that fear, they discovered a new hunger. There is a long silence on the tape. When Lawson speaks again, her voice is heavier, darker. They began to hunt us, not for our bodies. Our bodies were meaningless to them. They hunted us for our fear. They would appear in the night, shadows moving where no shadows should be, and they would reach inside our minds and drink. They would drink until there was nothing left, until the person was an empty shell, alive but no longer human. My ancestors fought them. For generations we fought them. We learned their weaknesses. We discovered that they could not tolerate certain sounds, certain vibrations. We found that they were bound by certain rules they could not break no matter how hungry they became. And we used that knowledge to drive them back, to trap them in places where they could not escape, to seal them away in the darkness where they belonged. The canyon you call Hell's Mouth was the last place, the place where we trapped the strongest of them, the oldest of them, the ones who had been hunting humans since before my people learned to make fire. We built the ward stones, we performed the rituals, we created a prison that would hold them forever, as long as the stones remained standing and the rituals were performed. The translator's voice breaks in, asking a question that is not clearly audible on the tape. Lawson's response is immediate. 300 years, she says. That is how long we have been guarding the canyon, since the Spanish came and nearly released them. A priest, a man who thought he was serving his god, entered the canyon and destroyed one of the ward stones. He believed he was casting out demons. Instead, he nearly released them all. My ancestor, a woman whose name has been forgotten, because she asked to be forgotten, spent 40 days in the canyon, rebuilding the stone, renewing the seals, fighting the Chidden with nothing but her voice and her will, and the old songs that had been passed down from the beginning. She succeeded, but she never left the canyon. She is still there, in a sense. Her spirit stands guard with the others, the generations of guardians who gave their lives to keep the prison sealed. When the American soldiers came in 1886, we knew what would happen. The spirits told us. Dakea saw it in his visions. We tried to warn them. We sent Alchese, a man who had fought alongside the Americans, a man they might trust. They did not listen. They destroyed the ward stone. And the Chidden woke up. We were waiting outside the canyon because that is what guardians do. We wait. We watch. We make sure that if the seals are broken, we are there to repair them before the old ones can escape into the wider world. Dakea led the rituals that night. He sang the old songs. He rebuilt the stones. He sealed the canyon again at the cost of his own life force. He died 3 days later, still singing, still guarding, still fighting the darkness, even as it consumed him. The tape continues for almost 2 hours. Lawson describes the rituals in detail. She explains the meanings of the songs, the purposes of the ward stones, the specific vulnerabilities of the Chidden. She provides information that could only have come from centuries of accumulated knowledge that had been preserved through oral tradition while empires rose and fell around her people. And she issues a warning. Your people have forgotten how to listen, she says near the end of the recording. You have forgotten that there are things in this world that your science cannot explain. You have forgotten that the darkness has teeth. My people remember because we never had the luxury of forgetting. We were conquered, imprisoned, nearly exterminated. But we kept the knowledge alive. We kept the vigil. We did our duty even when your soldiers were hunting us, even when your government was trying to destroy everything we were. Now you come to us and ask for our help. You want to know how to fight the Chidden. You want us to teach you the rituals, share the songs, give you the power that we have guarded for 300 years. And I will tell you, I will teach you. Because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate. But you must understand something. The Chidden cannot be destroyed. They cannot be killed. They are as old as the earth itself, and they will exist as long as the earth exists. All we can do is contain them. All we can do is keep them sleeping, and that requires sacrifice. That requires dedication. That requires people who are willing to spend their lives standing guard at the gates of hell. Your people are not good at sacrifice. Your people are not good at dedication. Your people want easy answers and quick solutions and technology that does all the work for them. The Chidin cannot be defeated with technology. They cannot be bombed or shot or poisoned. They can only be held at bay by human will, human courage, human voices raised in the old songs. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to devote your lives to guarding a darkness that most people do not even believe exists? Are you willing to sacrifice everything for a duty that will never be acknowledged, never be rewarded, never be understood? If you are not, then leave the canyon to us. Leave the guardianship to the Apache. We have been doing this for 300 years. We can do it for 300 more. But if you interfere again, if you send more soldiers or scientists or curious fools into that darkness, you will not just kill them. You will risk releasing the Chidin into a world that has forgotten how to fight them. And that, my young friends, would be the end of everything. The tape ends abruptly. The final sound is Lozen beginning to sing, a low, rhythmic chant in Apache that the translator does not attempt to interpret. Then silence. Robert Yellowhorse was released from custody 6 weeks after the interview with his grandmother. He was given an honorable discharge and a pension. He returned to the San Carlos Reservation, where he took over the family's role as a guardian of the canyon. He died in 1998 at the age of 70. His grandson, a man named Marcus Yellowhorse, now holds the position. According to sources within the Apache community, Marcus travels to the canyon 4 times a year to perform the rituals and maintain the ward stones. He is accompanied by a small group of elders who have been trained in the old ways. But the Yellowhorse family is not alone in their vigil anymore. In 1955, following the disaster of Operation Sundown and the revelations of the Lozen Yellowhorse interview, the United States government established a classified program called Guardian Protocol. The program was designed to monitor the canyon, support the Apache Guardians, and ensure that the seals remained intact. For almost 70 years, Guardian Protocol has operated in complete secrecy. It has a budget that does not appear in any public accounting. It has personnel who are officially listed as dead or retired. It has access to resources that most government agencies can only dream of. And its sole purpose is to make sure that the Chidin never escape. The documents leaked in 2019 included fragmentary references to the program's activities. There are reports of containment breaches in 1967, 1982, and 2008. Each breach was successfully sealed, but the reports indicate that the seals are weakening. The old songs are losing their power. The ward stones require more frequent renewal, and the Chidin are becoming more active, pressing against the barriers, probing for weaknesses, testing the limits of their prison. One document, dated January 2018, includes the assessment that should terrify anyone who reads it. Current projections indicate that existing containment measures will become insufficient within 15 to 20 years, the assessment states. The Apache Guardian tradition is declining as elders die, and younger generations show less interest in maintaining the vigil. Guardian Protocol resources are inadequate to compensate for this decline. Without significant intervention, a major containment failure is likely before 2040. The assessment recommends increased funding, expanded recruitment of indigenous guardians, and the development of new containment technologies. But it also includes a final paragraph that is more disturbing than anything else in the document. It should be noted that all previous attempts to develop technological alternatives to traditional containment methods have failed. The Chidin do not respond to physical barriers, electromagnetic fields, or any other measurable phenomenon. They respond only to human consciousness, specifically to the focused will of trained guardians using techniques that have been developed over centuries. Any attempt to mechanize or automate containment is likely to fail. The only reliable defense against the Cheeden is the human spirit itself. The human spirit. That is what stands between the Cheeden and the world. Not armies, not weapons, not technology. Just people. People who are willing to stand in the darkness and sing. People who are willing to sacrifice everything for a battle that most humans do not even know is being fought. The Apache understood this 300 years ago. They understood it when the Spanish came with their crosses and their conquistadors. They understood it when the Americans came with their rifles and their manifest destiny. They understood it when the modern world came with its satellites and its nuclear weapons and its arrogant belief that science could explain everything. They were prepared for the Battle of Shadow Canyon because they never forgot. They never stopped training. They never stopped passing down the knowledge. They never stopped standing guard. And now, if the leaked documents are to be believed, they are losing. Dr. Amanda Chen, the researcher who discovered the Lawson Yellow Horse tape, disappeared in 2014. Her apartment in Maryland was found empty. Her bank accounts were untouched. Her car was still in the parking lot. The official investigation concluded that she had simply walked away from her life, a theory that her friends and family reject completely. But before she disappeared, Chen managed to upload the tape and several related documents to an encrypted server. That server was hacked in 2019 by a group calling themselves the Shadow Archivists. They released everything they found, including the tape, the documents, and a collection of photographs that had never been seen before. The photographs show the canyon. They were taken at various points over the past century, some with old film cameras, some with modern digital equipment. In most of them, the canyon looks like any other desert landscape. Red rocks, blue sky, nothing unusual. But in some of the photographs, there are shadows, shadows that do not match the lighting, shadows that seem to move between frames, shadows that, if you look closely enough, appear to have shapes, humanoid shapes, reaching shapes, hungry shapes. One photograph dated 2017 shows a figure standing near one of the ward stones. The figure is wearing what appears to be traditional Apache clothing. The figure is singing, mouth open, arms raised toward the sky, and behind the figure, filling the canyon with darkness, are dozens of shadows, hundreds of shadows. Shadows pressing against an invisible barrier, trying to break through, trying to reach the singer, who is the only thing holding them back. The figure in the photograph is Marcus Yellowhorse, and the expression on his face is not one of fear. It is one of exhaustion, the exhaustion of a man who has been fighting the same battle his entire life. The exhaustion of a man who knows that he is running out of strength. The Shadow Archivists included a note with the photograph. "This is what is happening right now," the note reads. "This is what is happening while you go about your daily lives, while you watch television and scroll through social media and worry about politics and celebrity gossip. There is a man standing in a canyon in Arizona, singing songs that his ancestors taught him, holding back a darkness that would consume the world if it ever escaped. And he is losing. We do not know how to help him. We do not know if anyone can help him. But we believe that the world deserves to know the truth. The government has been hiding this for almost 140 years. The Apache have been fighting it for 300. And the rest of us have been living in ignorance, completely unaware of the debt we owe to the guardians who protect us. It is time for that to change. It is time for the truth to come out. It is time for humanity to wake up and recognize that the darkness is real, and it is hungry, and it is held back only by the courage of a few extraordinary people. The Yellow Horse family, the Apache guardians, the forgotten heroes who have been fighting the longest war in human history. They need our help. They need our prayers. They need us to remember what we have forgotten, because if we do not, the Cheeden will escape, and then it will not matter what we believe or do not believe. It will not matter how advanced our technology is. It will not matter how civilized we think we are. The shadows will come for us all, and there will be no one left to sing them back to sleep. The release of the Shadow Archives in 2019 created a brief sensation on the internet. Conspiracy theorists embraced the documents. Skeptics dismissed them as elaborate hoaxes. Mainstream media ignored them entirely, and the government, as always, said nothing. But something changed after the release. Something subtle, something most people did not notice, but something real. The military exclusion zone around the canyon was expanded. Additional resources were allocated to Guardian Protocol. And for the first time in decades, the government began actively recruiting Apache Guardians, offering scholarships, housing, and financial support to young people willing to train in the old ways. Marcus Yellowhorse gave a rare interview in 2021, speaking to a journalist who had spent years building trust with the Apache community. The interview was never published in any mainstream outlet, but it circulated widely on alternative media channels. "Something is different now," Yellowhorse said. "The government is taking us seriously for the first time in my life. They are finally understanding that what we do is real, that the threat is real, that without us, everything falls apart." The journalist asked what had changed. Yellowhorse was quiet for a long moment before answering. "The Chidden are waking up," he said, "not just stirring in their sleep like before, waking up. They know that the barriers are weakening, they can feel it, and they are getting ready. Ready for what?" Yellowhorse looked at the journalist with eyes that had seen too much darkness. "Ready to feed," he said. "Ready to come out of the canyon and into the world. Ready to drink the fear of every human being on the planet." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We are running out of time," he said. "My grandmother's generation, they had dozens of guardians. My father's generation had a dozen. My generation has 5. 5 people standing between the darkness and the world. 5 voices singing the old songs. 5 human beings trying to hold back an army of shadows. We need help. We need young people to learn the ways. We need the world to wake up and understand what is coming. Because if we fail, if the barriers break, there will be no second chance. The Chidden will spread across the earth like a plague. They will drink every drop of fear until there is nothing left but empty shells, bodies without minds, a world of the living dead." The journalist asked if there was any hope. Yellowhorse smiled, but it was a sad smile, a weary smile. "There is always hope," he said. "That is what our ancestors taught us. Even in the darkest times, even when everything seems lost, there is always hope. The Chidden are powerful, but they are not all powerful. They have weaknesses. They have rules they cannot break. And they are afraid of us, in their own way. They are afraid of the songs. They are afraid of the human spirit that refuses to surrender. As long as there are people willing to stand in the darkness and sing, there is hope. As long as there are guardians who remember the old ways, there is hope. As long as the human spirit refuses to be extinguished, there is hope." He looked directly into the camera. "But hope is not enough," he said. "Hope must be accompanied by action. We need people to step forward. We need people to learn. We need people to join the vigil, to add their voices to the song, to become guardians themselves. This is not a fight that the Apache can win alone. It never was. We have been carrying this burden for 300 years because no one else would. But the burden is getting heavier, the darkness is getting stronger, and we need help. So I am asking, I am begging, if you are watching this, if you hear my words, if something in your heart tells you that this is true, reach out, find us, join us, become a guardian. The future of humanity depends on it." The interview ended with Yellowhorse beginning to sing. It was the same song that his grandmother had sung at the end of the Lausanne tape almost 70 years earlier, the same song that had been passed down for 300 years. The same song that had held the darkness at bay through wars and famines and the near destruction of the Apache people. A song of power, a song of protection, a song of hope in the face of unspeakable horror. The canyon is still out there. The darkness is still waiting. The guardians are still singing. And the question now is whether the rest of us will listen. In these final moments, as we stand at the crossroads of history, facing a darkness that most people do not even believe exists, there is only one source of true strength, only one foundation that cannot be shaken, only one light that the shadows cannot extinguish. That light is faith. Faith in something greater than ourselves. Faith in a power that transcends the physical world. Faith in the God who created the heavens and the earth and everything in them, including the darkness that lurks in the hidden places. The Apache Guardians have always known this. Their songs are not just vibrations in the air. They are prayers. They are connections to something beyond the material world. They are channels through which divine power flows into the darkness, holding it back, keeping it contained, preventing it from consuming everything. The Chiden fear the songs because the songs are touched by the sacred. They cannot stand against the human spirit when that spirit is connected to its creator. They retreat from the light because the light comes from a source they cannot comprehend, cannot corrupt, cannot defeat. This is the secret that the government documents do not reveal. This is the truth that the scientific analyses cannot explain. The power that holds back the darkness is not human at all. It is divine. It flows through the guardians, but it does not come from them. It comes from God. And that power is available to everyone. You do not have to be Apache to stand against the darkness. You do not have to know the old songs or the ancient rituals. You simply have to open your heart to the one who is greater than any shadow, greater than any fear, greater than any power that hell can muster. Jesus Christ walked into the darkness and emerged victorious. He descended into the depths and conquered death itself. He faced the ultimate horror and transformed it into the ultimate triumph, and he offers that same power, that same victory, to everyone who calls on his name. The shadows cannot touch those who walk in his light. The fear cannot consume those who are filled with his love. The darkness cannot overcome those who are anchored in his truth. If you are watching this, if you feel the weight of the revelations you have just heard, if something in your soul is trembling at the reality of the threat that lurks in the hidden places of the earth, do not be afraid. The same God who gave the Apache the power to guard the canyon gives you the power to guard your own heart. The same light that shines in the songs of the guardians can shine in your life, driving out every shadow, dispelling every fear. Call on him, turn to him, place your trust in the one who holds all things in his hands. The battle between light and darkness is real. It has been raging since the beginning of time, and every human being is called to take a side. Choose the light, choose faith, choose the path that leads to life eternal. The guardians are singing in the canyon tonight. Their voices rise up to heaven, joined by the prayers of the faithful around the world. And together, united in spirit, connected to the source of all power and all love, they hold back the darkness. Join them, add your voice to the song, become a guardian of the light. The shadows are watching, the Chiden are waiting, but God is on his throne, and his kingdom will never fall. Remember the Apache, remember the guardians, remember the men and women who have stood in the darkness for 300 years, singing songs of power, holding back horrors that most people cannot imagine, and remember that their strength comes from the same source that is available to you right now, right here, in this very moment. Reach out, call on his name, and watch the shadows flee. The canyon of shadows is real, the Chiden are real, the battle is real, but so is the light, and the light will always overcome the darkness, always. May God bless you, may he protect you, may he give you the courage to face whatever shadows lie in your path. And may you never forget that no matter how dark the night becomes, the dawn is always coming. The guardians are singing. Can you hear them? Listen and believe.